Health and fitness requires more than just the physical work. It starts with the work you put in to grow your mind. Welcome to the Mind Gains podcast, where we discuss what it takes mentally to see results physically. I'm your host, Jess. Let's get started. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this podcast. You have no idea how much it means to me that you are here listening to the sound of my voice each week. I love talking about all things health and fitness, and I'm grateful for a platform where I can do that and share what I think is really important and hopefully really helpful information with you as well. And today is no different. We are wrapping up our 3-part series of the 3 macros with a deep dive into fats. And right off the bat, fats might sound a little scary. It sounds like if you eat fats, you're going to get fat. And that is not at all how that works. So I am here to put your mind at ease today and go over the role of dietary fats in the body, why they're so important, how much to be eating on a daily basis, and what some good sources of fats are. Eating dietary fats does not equate to putting on body fat. If you remember from last week, we went over the fact that the only way to put on body fat is by eating in a calorie surplus. So there's a lot more to it than just eating fats are going to make you fat. We need healthy fats in the diet if we want everything internally to be working as it should. So let's start here with what role fats play in the functioning of the body. The building blocks of dietary fats are fatty acids, and there are 2 different types of fatty acids. There are saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. When looking at the composition of these, a saturated fatty acid is one where all of its carbon atoms are connected by single bonds. There are no double bonds in a saturated fatty acid, meaning that each of its carbon atoms are saturated with the highest number of hydrogen atoms possible. Whereas an unsaturated fatty acid is one that contains one or more double bonds within its carbon chain, meaning it has fewer hydrogen atoms than the highest number possible, making it unsaturated. And if you didn't already feel a little lost, within that, you get monounsaturated fatty acids, or MUFAs, which is an unsaturated fatty acid that only has one double bond, and you get polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs, which is an unsaturated fatty acid that has more than one double bond in its structure. So I know that was a lot, and you definitely don't need to understand the chemical structure of these fatty acids, but I still wanted to touch on all of that. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. Healthy fats play such an important role in overall health. They contribute as an energy source. Even though carbs are still the body's number 1 source of energy, fats do contribute to this as well, and they can store energy for later use in the form of triglycerides. They're critical in hormone production, and they provide the building blocks for a lot of different hormones, namely steroid hormones, such as estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. So without adequate fat intake, the body can't produce these hormones or enough of them. This can cause hormonal imbalances, which throw off everything. This can affect hunger and fullness signals and metabolism, reproductive health, mood, and emotions. And to kind of pause here for a second, I want to also include why hormone regulation is important, because I think this is one of those words that we all just kind of say all the time, but we don't really understand fully what they are and why they're important and how they work. At least I know this was me for the longest time. I didn't really think much about hormones, and I really didn't fully understand what they were. Hormones are little chemical messengers that regulate different functions of the body. They travel to various parts of the body and help control how cells and organs function. For example, insulin is a hormone. It helps regulate blood sugar levels by signaling to the cells in your body that they need to start uptaking glucose or sugar from your bloodstream so that you don't have high levels of blood sugar for too long. So After eating, the pancreas releases the hormone insulin, which says to your cells, hey guys, you need to start absorbing some of this sugar that's in the blood so that blood sugar doesn't get too high. And that's just one example of a hormone, but there are numerous others that play just as important roles in the overall regulation of the body. So, having properly signaling hormones is really, really important. Again, I always go back to hunger and fullness cues. Leptin is a hormone that signals to your body that you've had enough to eat. You're full, you're done. Ghrelin is a hormone that signals that you're hungry and that your body needs food right now. And a lot of people out there don't have properly signaling hormones when it comes to these. I don't think I have to explain why it's important to be able to have hormones that can correctly signal when your body needs more food and when it needs you to stop eating. And this is why I always say that if you don't have hunger and fullness cues, this is a huge, huge red flag that something internally is not working properly and needs to be addressed, because you should be feeling those two signals throughout the day. Fats are vital components of cell membranes, which is important for allowing the hormones to interact well with cells and adequately perform and carry out the intended functions of them. They help support cognitive function. They strengthen the immune system, increase heart health, and contribute to skin and hair health. Another essential role of dietary fats, we have to eat dietary fats in order to be able to absorb fat soluble vitamins, which are vitamins that dissolve in fat. These are vitamins A, D, E, and K. So let's break this down a little bit further. Vitamin A is essential in healthy eyesight. Vitamin D is critical in immune health. Vitamin E is important for the maintenance of healthy skin and eyes. And vitamin K plays a really, really vital role in bone health and blood clotting. All of these vitamins have important roles beyond what I just listed here, but these are the main functions of each. And if you're not eating proper dietary fats, your body doesn't have the ability to absorb these fat soluble vitamins. If they have to be dissolved in fats, but they don't have any fat to dissolve in, what do you think is going to happen? So, dietary fats are just as important to the health and proper functioning of the body as proteins and carbohydrates are. Do you see how we really need and want the appropriate amount of all three macros on a daily basis to help support our bodies and our health well? So, then how much fats should you be taking in per day? The general recommendation for fat intake is anywhere from 20 to 35% of your daily intake. So, fats are going to be the thing that you need the least amount of in comparison to carbs and protein. Going back to our example of someone eating 2,000 calories a day, 20 to 35% would be 44 grams to 77 grams of fats a day. The way that you would find that number is by multiplying 2,000 by 0.2 for 20%, or by 0.35 for 35% to get 400 to 700. Essentially meaning that if your intake is 2,000 calories a day, general recommendation is for anywhere from 400 to 700 of those calories to be coming from fat sources per day. In order to find out what this would be in grams, you would then divide those numbers that you get, which in this instance are going to be 400 and 700, by 9, because there are 9 calories for every 1 gram of fat. If you remember in previous episodes, we went over the fact that both proteins and carbohydrates hold 4 calories for every 1 gram, whereas fats hold 9 calories for every 1 gram. So fats are much, much more calorically dense, which is definitely something to keep in mind. They hold over double the amount of calories for every 1 gram than proteins and carbs do. And I bring that up because if you are someone who is looking to lose fat and you're trying to stay in a calorie deficit, including more fatty foods throughout your day might make it harder to stay within your calorie deficit, purely just due to the fact that they're calorically dense. That's not to say that they don't belong in the diet. We've already determined that they are essential, but I just like to kind of point that out. And this is where I'll get questions like, is salmon bad for me to be eating because it has a lot of fat? And the answer is absolutely not. Salmon is great for you. It's very rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which is an essential nutrient that the body cannot produce on its own and must be obtained through the diet. So if you're in a calorie deficit, fat loss phase, this doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't have salmon. It just means that you might have to work some things around in your day in order to make sure you're still able to hit your protein goal without going over on calories. Something that's a little harder to do with salmon because of its higher calorie content, because it's very fatty, over something like chicken breast that's very lean and doesn't have a high fat content. So it doesn't have as many calories per serving. It's just about finding which foods help you reach your current targets and current protocols the best. Maybe salmon is something that you include more sparingly when you're in a cut, as opposed to when you're at maintenance or in a building phase. You have more calories to work with, so it's easier to include the salmon more often. Now, getting back into saturated and unsaturated fats. Saturated fats are typically solid at room temperature. Think things like coconut oil, butter, lard, or from meats. I'm specifically thinking like a fatty piece of steak. Like you can see the chunk of fat that's on that steak. Unsaturated fats are typically liquid at room temperature. Things like olive oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, peanut oil, the oil that's in salmon. In general, saturated fats are considered more of the unhealthy fats, whereas unsaturated fats are healthy fats. So, when choosing your fat sources, you want to prioritize the healthy, unsaturated fats. You can still have the butter and the fats that are in things like cookies and cakes and the desserts, but you really want to include a lot more healthy fats, of course. I also want to touch really quickly on trans fat, otherwise known as partially hydrogenated oils. Trans fats are unsaturated fats that have been chemically altered, where hydrogen gas was added to them to make them more solid at room temperature in order to increase the shelf life of it. It's found in a lot of processed foods, and the FDA has banned the use of most of it in the US because it's extremely unsafe in larger amounts. It increases the risk of type 2 diabetes, the risk of stroke and heart disease, and it has no nutritional benefit whatsoever. It is recommended to avoid trans fats as much as you possibly can. You will still see trans fats on nutrition labels, and a lot of the time, foods say it has 0 grams of trans fat, but companies can list 0 grams if a serving contains less than half a gram. So if you want to really be watchful with trans fats, look for partially hydrogenated oils in the ingredients listed on your food, even if it says it has 0 grams of trans fat. And if you see that on the list, that product does include trans fats. It's just less than half a gram per serving. Another thing I wanted to touch on that gets a lot of attention is cholesterol. Cholesterol is a type of lipid, and if you don't know what lipids are, they include fats, oils, and cholesterol. It has been pushed for so long that eating high levels of dietary cholesterol affect your cholesterol levels. Usually, eggs are the thing people like to go back to. That eating a lot of eggs increases cholesterol levels because it increases LDL cholesterol, which in short is low density lipoproteins. And this is the bad cholesterol. And yes, there is good cholesterol. Our body does need it. And it's called HDL or high density lipoproteins. If you get any sort of metabolic blood work panel done, you'll see LDL cholesterol and HDL cholesterol on there. But, anyways, a lot of people think that eating eggs is going to increase their cholesterol because eggs contain a high level of dietary cholesterol. But recent studies have shown that dietary cholesterol has little impact on the cholesterol in the body. So don't be scared to eat eggs. Just like anything, eat a balanced diet, live an active lifestyle, and there's a really, really high chance that you're going to be more than good. We kind of already touched on different sources of fats, but going through these again, my go tos for healthy fats are salmon, avocado, which is like my number one. I put avocado on everything, olive oil, nuts, and seeds. I'll also do cheese, peanut butter, or nut butter, or regular butter, but these aren't quite as good of options as the previous ones, but they do still have their place. So when I'm structuring my meals out for the day, I always have a protein source and a carb source. And the reason you'll hear me say I only sometimes add a fat on there as well is because it just depends on what the rest of my day looks like. Because we don't need as many grams of fats, and because I'm often cooking with olive oil or butter, I don't always have to add additional fat onto my meal. Or if I'm eating salmon or chicken thighs or steak, which are all protein sources with a higher fat content. But if I happen to be on the lower end of my fat goal for the day, I might add some avocado on the side of my dinner. It really just depends. But in general, you want to be aiming for 20 to 35% of your daily intake coming from unsaturated, healthy fats. That just about wraps up our series into the 3 macronutrients. I hope you found this information just as interesting and helpful as I do. Again, I know a lot of people really don't care about the nitty gritty science behind this stuff. And I usually try not to get too in depth with it in these episodes, but this series was more for those who are like me and find nutritional science interesting. And I hope you're coming out of this series having learned a lot more about macronutrients, each of their roles and why they're important, than you knew when you first started. Of course, if you have any questions for me or any suggestions for future topics you'd like to hear more about, let me know. Please consider helping the show by sending it to someone who could benefit from it, sharing it on social media, and tagging me in it. You have no idea how much it helps reach people just outside of my own personal reach. But with all that being said, I appreciate you taking the time to listen today and learn something. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day today, and we'll talk next time.